Hello everyone, welcome to the 15th video of our YouTube channel. And in last video we have discussed and we dive deeper into the knowledge of Vipassana or the practice of Vipassana. And then in that video we were trying to give more of a practical insights into Vipassana meditation and how the Vipassana meditation can be seen as an activity that runs through the three layers of our mind. So for the sake of analysis, we have presented sort of like a hypothesis in our last video, which is quite similar to Carl Jung's philosophy. So we mentioned that our human mind can be divided into three layers. The conscious layer, that is the topmost one that runs with the help of five senses, the subconscious, and lastly the unconscious layer. So the Vipassana meditation is actually practice, and the practice of that meditation spans across all three layers. So we have clearly discussed about that, and then I briefly explained how the meditative samadhis or the purity state of samadhis can affect the Vipassana meditation, can affect the three layers of our mind, and then how certain emotions and chunks of thoughts can be witnessed during the meditation. So this video is going to be a follow-up video for that, and this video is focusing more on the certain Vipassana knowledge or the wisdom that arises from Vipassana meditation that should be known by every Buddhist practitioner. And this Vipassana knowledge and wisdom directly comes from the canonical text. So if you refer to the Buddhist Pali canon, you can find plenty of sutras or the canonical scriptures that are related and written pretty relevant to this subject. But then you won't be able to find all these aspects of wisdom related to Vipassana meditation in a single sutra. So to make your life easier, in this video I have put forth all the Vipassana knowledge, the points related to Vipassana knowledge, covering the entire spectrum of Vipassana meditation, so that it can be really helpful and useful for you to engage continually in this practice. In typical Buddhist jargon, these aspects of wisdom and knowledge of Vipassana meditation is usually referred to as the 16 stages of insight. So we are going to present all these 16 stages with some practical examples, and so that you can really grasp what these stages actually mean and how these stages can be really fruitful in your day-to-day Vipassana practice, in, let's say, for an example, to be free from your suffering, or to like if you are, let's say, have already gotten into this the practice or the line of specific path, then you need to know about these 16 stages, so that you make sure that you will not fall into any traps of the hyperdimensional beings. So what is the beauty of expounding this Vipassana knowledge and wisdom? Well, if you go through this information, you would understand easily that this information is basically, this wisdom is basically acquired by deeply studying how our mind works. So it is that simple. It simply boils down to how our thought process works, and how Buddha studied about our thought process with respect and in relation to the suffering, and in relation to his less traveled spiritual path practice, and in relation to the discipline he required for his path. In in typical spiritual and meditation practices, we bring the Vipassana knowledge to be free from suffering, and also to be like keep distance between disturbing thoughts, emotions, to our awareness. In general knowledge, Vipassana is known as the mindfulness. So by keeping this mindfulness practice continually, we maintain this distance, so that our human awareness is always being free from this contamination with the impulses and whatever the causes that are giving resulting suffering. But then, is it the real purpose of Vipassana? Well, when I say real, we always relate this to the most difficult, arduous practice that was undertaken by Gautam Buddha. And in that practical scope, then the Gautam Buddha also had to fight against many hyperdimensional forces, many unknown forces, and most of these unknown forces were the direct manifestations of his own mind. And then the practitioner or the ascended master in that capacity has to be really aware of his thought process, specifically the conscious mind, and how it is getting contaminated to the outside world objects. And this video and these 16 stages of Vipassana wisdom also speaks about that. So let's talk about these Vipassana knowledges one by one. So as I mentioned earlier, in Buddhist practices, the speciality lies in its way of observing our mind, or the paying attention to our human awareness. So whenever you see an outside object, be it something that gives rise to anger, to your lust, or to give you some sort of suffering, then you have to first observe it, and you have to have a very subtle state of your mind to first see and to witness the rise and falling nature of this object at your thought level. So this is what we refer to as the knowledge of rise and fall. So let's say now you have a negative emotion that is happening in your mental sphere. So this will be felt to your mind, and then you start to observe this the negative emotion, the rise of the negative emotion and the fall of it at the mind level. And this negative emotion is usually followed by, let's say, a pain in your heart. Now, even in that pain, the rising and falling of that pain can also be observed at your mind level. So this is what we refer to as the knowledge of rise and fall. But the thing is, before we come to the Vipassana practice in Buddhism, we usually engage in samatha meditation. So samatha meditation is arriving to the calm, abiding nature of your mind. And then your mind becomes so subtle to the level that you can even observe and witness very subtle rise and fall, falling of thoughts, or even the small thoughts in chunk. The chunk of thoughts in very subtle level. So if you develop your human awareness to observe that and easily detect rise and fall of your thought process, then you can disengage from this identification with that. So this is what this knowledge of rise and fall is really useful to stay away from the contamination and not to being identified with that process. The knowledge of rise and fall is then followed by the knowledge of dissolution. So if you continue practicing or observing or witnessing rise and falls of your thoughts, emotions, then at some point you will come to realize that they will vanish or go away by their own nature. So they will dissolve through the three layers of your mind. So this is what we refer to as the knowledge of dissolution. So when you arrive to the knowledge of dissolution, the advantage is that the mental impressions due to contamination or the identification with the external objects, that will not remain in you. And the mental impressions won't be stored in any of the layers of your mind, and so that this information won't be stacked up in your human consciousness. In that way, one can be free from the mental impressions. The third Vipassana knowledge is the knowledge of fear. So this is usually the fear or the terror that arises within us due to the long-term engagement of the Vipassana practice about the possible fetters or the defilements in our mind. So when you have attained, let's say, Samadhis or jhanas based on Vipassana training, then you are always remaining in this calm abiding nature due to your Vipassana awareness. And then whenever a contamination occurs with respect to an external object, whenever a negative emotion arises, whenever a feeling or feeling of suffering arises in you, immediately your human awareness will detect that, and then sort of like, fear or terror arises due to this rising of the defilement or the mental fetter. So this is the knowledge of fear. But usually having a fear or terror for your thought process, the process actually doesn't make any sense. Why you need to be fearful of your thought process and all these rising and falling phenomenon? Well, in this case, according to the canonical studies, we simply say it is the knowledge of fear, because now you are a genuine Vipassana practitioner and you genuinely have this fear of letting your mind to be contaminated with sinful thoughts. That is the main reason. And with the knowledge of fear comes the knowledge of consequences. Now this is the knowledge that you need to have to foresee how the contamination of your mind can lead to the post-processing actions, or the consequence, the actions that can happen due to the consequences, or the subsequent actions due to this thought process. So for an instance, let's say now you are not a very good Vipassana practitioner, and at night during the sleep you come to experience a horrifying dream, a horrifying scene that could perhaps, maybe somebody is trying to kill you, or somebody is trying to steal your money and collapse of your rental apartment or the houses. Then of course you would have a terrifying fear, and then you quickly wake up from your sleep, and then immediately you would also take necessary actions to, like, let's say, with this fear, let's say you want to make sure whether something happened to your properties or some valuable belongings, or maybe if you saw someone has been attacked in your dream, then you want to make sure that something happened to that person in real life. So likewise, the knowledge of fear and knowledge of the rise and fall, the knowledge of these demonic entities and all the mental figures, mental images, can result some consequent actions to you. They are usually followed by actions later on. So this to avoid performing any unnecessary drastic actions, you need to have the knowledge of consequences. Well, now let's talk about the next Vipassana knowledge and the wisdom arises from our spiritual practice. So we have this thing called knowledge of disenchantment. So the knowledge of disenchantment defines the knowing of the continuum of the mental impressions or the mental fabrications. So in Buddhist jargon we call it the sanskaras. And now the question we have as a practitioner is, when does sanskara arise? I mean, when we teach Buddhism, when we teach practices to usually in general sense, we tend to think that the rising of sanskara is a problem to everybody, which is not true. The rising of sanskara is a problem to the practitioner only at a certain stage of their path. So that is one distinction that we have to make about treading on that specific path. Because let's say now at the beginning of the Buddhist path, with the help of a guru or maybe with your own effort, you come to experience a certain amount of light, or let's say the first stage, the fruition mind of from your meditation as a meditative experience. So that is one thing. But during that initial or the early phase of your practice, the mental sanskara is not a problem. The mental sanskara always becomes critical or problematic, usually at the end of your path. Usually that occurs to you after achieving the first few couple of fruition states of your mind. So know the difference. So at the beginning of your path, you don't need to really worry about the sanskaras. And sometimes the sanskaras are also required if you want to stay in samsara or in your normal day-to-day mundane life. If and only if you come to this, the specific stage where your mind is just about to go through the death process, or after the first 3 fruition states, that's why you have to be really careful about your sanskaras or the mental impressions. So that's how the mental impressions or the fabrications are usually treated in the Buddhist path at a very specific state. Well, now the next knowledge is the desire for deliverance. Now, from the first, the fifth knowledge, the knowledge about the disenchantment, after you achieve that, during this period, the mental visions you get, the experiences you are getting, not only through your meditation but also from outside, as an outside objects, all the things that you are getting, they can be sometimes really frightening. A fear may arise in you, so you also don't know what you should be doing. Sometimes the blackness of the mind appears, and let's say now you are in the typical Buddhist path, we do not speak about the shadow of the soul, and in a very specific path the shadow of the person might also arise at the same time. So during that very specific period, sometimes the practitioner has to go through intense suffering, and therefore during this period, knowledge about the desire and also the deliverance is paramount. So the practitioner knows exactly where the suffering gets intense and where he has to be careful about making his own decisions. The knowledge that arises from the Vipassana is the reflective contemplation. So now, usually as we refer to the spiritual practice, the noble seeking in Buddhist path, then you have to do like several things in your path. People usually think that the direct practice or the direct attainment through practicing the path is just a grave misunderstanding. Even Gautam Buddha tried to did many different things during his ascension process. Specifically, if you are a bodhisattva, then your path is unique. You also don't know what you should be doing, because there are many different instructions and there are many experiences coming to you, and if you are doing this for the first time, then there's always a learning curve, so it always takes time. The direct path never works for a bodhisattva, and most of the time people ascribe or trying to relate the direct path because they don't understand how a Buddha would progress through the Buddhist path. Buddha's mind is always different to a follower. Most of the time, the Buddhist practitioners who have treaded along this Buddhist path and then they come to one fruition state of mind and they think that at this point his evolutionary path should end, which is wrong. Buddha is somebody who is making his own way, finding his own light by doing many different things. So always the direct path doesn't work for Buddhas. Therefore, the reflective contemplation about what the practice entails, what the instructions were, is important. The next point is the knowledge of equanimity. Now, the equanimity as a quality of the individual or as a quality of our mind, it can be attained with the help of a certain meditative samadhi state. So for instance, if you have, let's say, activated certain chakras in your body, let's say the higher chakras, the sixth, the third eye, and also the seventh crown chakra, then there are a set of samadhis that you can get attuned yourself to them, so that you can stay in these samadhis and then you can make a good use of that, so that you make sure that you are always in this equanimity state. However, that is sort of it's a sort of a spiritual bypassing, where you make use of a samadhi state to go into an equanimity. However, it is also not wrong, but it can be used effectively to identify, let's say for an example, the mental impressions that we discussed in the last stage of your path. So the mental impressions and afflictions or negative emotions or whatever you want to call, so they usually come and go, and they can be effectively monitored with the help of the equanimity that you attain from the samadhis I have mentioned before. And the knowledge of equanimity is required for Vipassana, because as I mentioned, all the fearful experiences, negative emotions, or the adverse states of your mind can come into the surface, or they can leak into your conscious layer of mind during the last stage of your meditation, during the last stage of your spiritual path, specifically in the Buddhist path. So then you have to be equanimous. You have to maintain your equanimity throughout the day. Well, nobody is coming to impose any rules over you, but it's something that you gain from your own practical experience. Because always the rising and falling of mental impressions, emotions, that happens at our mind level, and the significance of all these rising and falling elements, the significance of them, the pain that these rising and falling objects incurred in us, it is relative to our ego. So depending of this knowledge, you can determine to what extent these mental rising and falling objects can make a really adverse influence over you. So let's try to find about the next set of Vipassana knowledges. So the next important knowledge is called the defining and the knowledge about the mind and matter. So usually before you enter into the path, you have to do an in-depth study about the five aggregates. So the first two terms in the five aggregates are called Nama Rupa. And usually in Pali and also in Sinhalese Buddhist teachings, we usually relate this knowledge or insight into the knowledge of Nama Rupa. But if you take the English translation, it mentions it as the knowledge about the mind and matter. So then what is the true interpretation or the true definition of this insight? I think this has to do more with the knowledge and the definition of mind and matter. Because usually before you enter into the Buddhist path, you get to know about this insight by listening to the Dharma, or by listening to your Guru, or your own meditative experience. So that's what happened to me. The last one is what happened to me. So the path of Buddhism, or the trajectory of Buddhism, so that opens only at a certain point. Not everyone who is trying hard to get themselves into Nirvana enters into the path or enters into the stream. It only opens at a certain specific point. And before that, usually we come to know of the relationship between the mind and matter. So usually all the experiences, visions that we get from five senses, they are connected and related to our consciousness through the mind stream. And this mind stream actually keeps us inside our physical body. So that's how our mind stream or the consciousness is entangled into our physicality. So this knowledge will arrive to most of the meditators if you are going through the bodhisattva path. You will come to experience or see how our physical body is created in every moment in relation to the stream of our mind, or with respect to our consciousness. Well, now the next insight or the next knowledge, Vipassana knowledge, is the knowledge about the causes and conditions. So if and only if we know about the causes and conditions, we come to know of the relation between the karma and their effects, and also the consequences of our actions that were caused by the mental fabrications, and also our actions, and also our verbal communication. So you need to know about this relationship between the causes and conditions, and only with this knowledge one can refrain from making further causes for their samsaric existence. One can be free from making causes and conditions for creating more karmas. So this knowledge is therefore imperative. I think among all the Vipassana knowledges, the most important thing is about the knowledge of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. So if and only if you have this, then your practice becomes complete, and it also helps you renunciate your the worldly life or the mundane life. According to the typical Buddhist teaching, we say that the suffering emerges from contamination to the five aggregates. So if you are inclined or attached to five aggregates, and because of the rising of the identification with I, or the I-ness, me, mine, then the suffering emerges from that, because there's a certain identification, and that identification gives rise to the identity of self. So in Buddhist teaching, the identification with the self, it has to be avoided. So there's a clear and significant difference between the Buddhist non-self teaching and the Hindu or Advaita self teaching. Because when you entered into the Buddhist path, then you have to be always and continually be in alert of whether your mind is getting contaminated with the self or the I-ness, and that helps to eradicate the ego. in this specific Vipassana or insight knowledge, we try to maintain this, or we try to cut the contamination of I-ness with the mind stream as well as external situations, so that we can be free from suffering. And this being free from suffering, it happens at the mind level. And whenever thoughts, emotions or negative emotions rise due to this contamination or inclination, then we have to bring our Vipassana practice, and we have to see the impermanence of this rising of negative emotions and thoughts, so that their diminishing can also be seen at the same time. That helps being free from the suffering. So this is why this 11th Vipassana knowledge or the insight is quite useful in your day-to-day practice, and it is important as well as it is compulsory when you get into the path towards Nirvana. However, this knowledge is not only useful for the Buddhist practitioner, but also for anybody who can actually couple this knowledge with the mindfulness, and then try to see everything that is happening around us. All the suffering give rise. Suffering are caused by all these mental impressions, emotions, and fabrications, and inclination to them. So this knowledge is not only important for a Buddhist monk, but also it can be really useful for a person who simply wants to be free from suffering, or simply wants to maintain equanimity in their daily life. So likewise, the Vipassana knowledges and insights, they are not only useful for ascetics, but also for practitioners who want to have peace in their daily life. The next important insight is the knowledge of conformity and adaptation. So we call it Anuloma Jnana in Pali. And this Anuloma Jnana comes to the practitioner with the engagement in the Paticca or the causes and effect conditioning cycle. Contemplating regularly on this causes and effect completion cycle, one comes to understand their interrelation, the interrelation between the 12 links of dependent origination, and then naturally Anuloma Jnana, or the wisdom of the forward relation will arise to the practitioner. So when he engages in this practice for a prolonged period of time, and when he is in the middle of the path, he will come to attain the first fruition stage of the mind. So at this stage, we usually say that the yogi or the practitioner comes to experience a glimpse of Nirvana. So that is not the complete Nirvana, it is just a glimpse of Nirvana. Some people also call it the first stage of the Sotapatti or the Sovan knowledge. And some meditators argue that is where we for the first time see the fruition mind from meditation. So there are, different people have different interpretations and sharing of their experiences with the public. Yes, so continuing with the insight, Vipassana insights, the next knowledge that arrives to the practitioner, these are the last four Vipassana insights. So the next one comes to the practitioner is the change of the lineage. So that's how we put it in English. Well, this can mean many different things. Now, change of lineage, as the name implies, changing of our spiritual the lineage that we used to practice. But that's not what it means. It means from an ordinary person, you become a noble person. You come to the stream of the Buddhist path, and when you walk along the stream, you come to the first fruition stage of your mind. And then we say that instead of the ordinary person, you belong to the stream or the lineage of noble person. In Buddhist jargon, this is referred to as Aryapudgala. So you become one of the Aryapudgalas, and you no longer belong to the ordinary level human lineage. So that's what it means. But after that, there's another insight that comes to you, and this is what we call the Gotrabhu Jnana. So the Gotrabhu Jnana, which essentially means that because you belong to this spiritual lineage or the lineage of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas and Aryas, from your own meditative insights, from your own meditative Samadhis, now new wisdom arrives to you. Wisdom simply emanates from you, and from that you can speak day and night if you want. Well, some practitioners have the ability to preach Dharma in more eloquently, but for some people they may not have. So the ability to bring the Dharma discussions eloquently, it also depends on your merits and number of lifetimes you have spent in samsara. So there are many different factors for that. But in a nutshell, like Buddha did, the Gotrabhu Jnana, or the wisdom or the knowledge arise from your own meditative Samadhis, helps you to put forth the teachings eloquently. And now, starting from your Sotapanna, or the first fruition stage, now you continue and you walk along this path, and then the knowledge of the path emerges to you. The knowledge, you become more knowledgeable about the path. So this is what we call the Magga Jnana. You become aware of your marga, or the path. Sometimes due to our previous merits that we had in many lifetimes, the practitioner may come to witness meditative lights or meditative samadhis even without becoming a monk, even without having sense restraint, even going into let's say a seclusion, or become a monk in a monastic order. Some people claim to have these experiences. Sometimes the practitioners, just ordinary people, come to have meditative experiences at home. So how is that possible? It's mainly because of our past life merits, and due to our past life deeds, and also due to, let's say, sudden awakening. Because in Zen meditation, in Zen Buddhism, we explicitly talk about the sudden awakening, which we do not usually make a reference to in Theravada Buddhism. So if you, let's say, for an example, you have this sudden meditative insights, sudden meditative samadhis, followed by, let's say, adhigame, or you come to witness the golden state of your mind. Some people claim to have witnessed this at home, but if you go and tell this to somebody from Theravada Buddhism, definitely they would not agree, because such experience can, in their opinion, can only be witnessed if you get into the path. So that kind of epiphany or insight is only available when you are walking in the path. That is not true, because our human consciousness belongs to Mother Nature. It doesn't belong to a religion. So therefore, even a practitioner who used to do meditation at home, they may have these insights. So that is certainly possible. But if and only if you walk along this path, um, this knowledge will arise to you. This knowledge will come to you about which fruition comes first, and then after that, how the defilements will settle, and how the second fruition mind will appear to you, and how the defilements after that will settle in your mind, and likewise. Um, the signs, symbols, and how the mind works, and how the darkness appears at each stage. This entire knowledge will come to you when you walk along this path. Well, that was about the knowledge of the path. And after that, this is immediately followed by the knowledge of fruition. So, there are many debates and even discrepancies between the lineages, spiritual lineages, where the Buddhist practices are usually taking place. And if you come to Sri Lanka, and many different monastic orders have many different opinions about how the fruition mind should appear to you. And if you go and practice in, let's say, Thailand or some other Theravada Buddhist country, they have their own way of interpretations and ideas. And sometimes when you check with the path checkers in Sri Lanka, how the fruition mind should appear, they have a totally different idea. So in that way, sometimes depending on the path checkers too, the fruition mind will appear to the practitioner will get different. So likewise, there is no such one criteria to determine how this happens. For instance, when someone, let's say now, having jhanic experience, he might, feel relaxation in their body to the level that he might not feel the carrying of the body, the physical body. The pain or the weight of the physical body might be disappearing. But we cannot equate this to simply to Sotapanna fruition stage or the first fruition stage. And therefore, there are a lot of misconceptions about this path. So because of this reason, the Buddhist practitioner path has to be properly defined, in my humble opinion. And if you look into the descriptions of the path and fruition mentioned in, let's say, well-renowned Buddhist monks like Redukani Chandravimala and some other European, the Buddhist monks from European and Western traditions, there are many mismatches, discrepancies. So it is really difficult to give a clear definition. But if we are aligning our experiences to, let's say, the former Buddhist monk, Redukani Chandravimala is a well-renowned Buddhist meditator, then at each fruition stage, a specific, very clear fruition mind should appear to the meditator. So that is the indication to verify that we have come to this milestone after eradicating certain number of fetters. So likewise, in order to have a proper definition of path, we need to inquire more information from many different meditators. But that's how I have experience in when I walked through this path. So with the appearance of the fruition mind, we will learn how the fetters are behaving. So for instance, when eradicating the first couple of fetters or the defilements, we will get a relaxation, a release of a burden, and then the fruition mind appears during meditation. So that's usually what we consider as the milestone. And with that, the knowledge how these fetters will operate within our mind, that knowledge will come to you. And sometimes through this fruition mind, certain meditative visions also may appear to you, and they may reveal many different things about your consciousness and about, let's say, certain things that you need to do in order to progress in the path. And sometimes even the people, the relatives or your karmic relations that you need to help. So likewise, many where invaluable information will come to you through your consciousness. And all this information will come to you with the knowledge of the fruition. Alright, now after that, the final insight that we get from the Vipassana practice is the knowledge of reviewing. And at this stage, in my humble opinion, we need to go and discuss, as I mentioned, with many different practitioners, and we need to share our knowledge about the insights we have, the meditative, the fruition stage that will come to us. Otherwise, we won't be able to gauge what actually is happening within us. So, for instance, in the middle of this path, let's say after 2 fruition states, sometimes the fruition state will disappear. The blackness of the mind will appear again due to remaining fetters in your mind. And sometimes certain fears, let's say some ingrained memories also will come into the surface. So we need to also have a discerning ability to the which features or the which messages that we should actually be treating, or the which messages or the visions that we are getting from the consciousness to discard. So likewise, we need to have this reviewing ability and possibility to really see what we should do with our practice. Usually for an arihant, someone who is destined to become an arihant or a saint, he usually gets instructions from their guru. But for a Buddha, he doesn't have any guru. So he is walking along this path without any guru. And his own mind, his own consciousness sometimes can become the guru. So in such a situation, we need to create all these mental images, visions, messages coming from our consciousness delicately. So that's why we need to have this reviewing ability in our Vipassana practice. So let's see how Vipassana training can be utilized in our daily practice. Let's take a simple example. Now suppose that we are going to an expensive restaurant and there is only expensive food available, and we also have a tendency that we want to eat up to our expectation. So we want to have food exactly according to our taste. So there's a kind of like a tendency. Some people have these type of tendencies, and if the expectation is not met, the entire day is ruined. So suppose that we are in such a situation, and then the food is served, and let's say now there's a side dish that you really would like to enjoy, but it is not up to your standard. So it's lack of taste, and at the same time the food is really expensive, and there's a dissatisfaction in you. So for some people, this dissatisfaction also remains in their subconscious level. So the anger arises due to this dissatisfaction, and then this maybe as an emotion or maybe as a thought, it will remain in you. And then let's say that when this person goes home, if he picks up a fight with somebody, it will escalate due to this dissatisfaction, due to this buried or unreleased emotion or unreleased anger. So that could happen to this person. And this is one example how unresolved emotions or unreleased thoughts, emotions, anger can lead into further problems in our day-to-day life. And if we have the practice of Vipassana or mindfulness, we should be able to release this negative emotion or anger or whatever that remains within our subconscious or psyche. So this is a very simple example. So for anybody who only wants to have just to have a peaceful mind, and maintain daily mindfulness, they can be aware of all these unresolved or remaining emotions within us. So that's just a simple example. And with this example, we conclude this video. So anybody who is watching this video, if they have comments about these 16 Vipassana insights and also the examples we have given in this video, please do not forget to comment on the video, so that can be a learning curve for